Hi, Beck Mack here for Pops Art, and I am at Milani Gallery, surrounded by the sights and sounds of movement, action, activity, and work actually being generated while I'm standing here. I am at Robert Andrew show Inscribed, not Inscription, and he's standing here. Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks, Beck. How are you?
So good to be in amongst your work that is actually constructing itself as we're standing here. It's sort of like living in motion. What is the core of this for you?
Well, this work uses ochre coloured cotton string, and it'll go through about 4 kilometres of it over the exhibition. But it's spelling out a word, ngangana, which is the word for language in the Yaru language, which is my mother's language group around Broome area. So over the time, this lays down over and over again, layers and layers of string, which become a landscape. So it's almost taking, I suppose, the interpretations of language and putting it back into a place where it becomes part of the landscape as opposed to a sort of hard-ed binary text. And that's sort of, it's something that most of the works here have that sort of relationship with language and text and making, I suppose, in a way, it's making a space. It's not reinterpreting the text. It's making a space for the text to be, and emerge. And it's leaving a space for people to come in and not be directed by it. By give them a space to sit within that space of that, how that materialises on the ground and on the wall. And
What is this word that is emerging?
The word's ngangana, which is N-G-A-N, should have a hyphen in there, G-A, but the hyphen didn't make it in there. But it's the word, it's basically, it's Yaru ngangana, which is Yaru language, right. And Yaru is the mob in Broome, so it's basically the word for language, or their word for language, from my understanding and what I've sort of been sent from the language group. But I know with a lot of these words and the interpretations, there's a lot lost between the ideas of Indigenous languages and English languages. The interpretations are somewhat a little bit simple, I think.
Yes, and generalised, I guess, and so removed from the actual source of what the word originally meant. And just so people understand, like when the exhibition opened, this was just the earth, the ground underneath, and since it's opened, the word has now been written via this string mechanism. And then if they come back in a week, which when the show closes, it will be again evolved even further.
It's probably halfway, a little bit less than halfway through, or half the amount of string that's going down on there. So where you're getting areas that are built up now, they'll be sort of twice as higher, and it won't become more clear, but it will become fuller, I think, as a word, and it lifts itself basically off there, and there's all these connections that are making up this as opposed to this just one hard edge. There's a whole lot of different threads that make up that word, and it's like the word on country has a lot of those threads within it that sort of are coming from experience, are coming from the way the land talks to you. It comes from that knowledge systems that have been there for tens of thousands of years. So it's really hard for me to say what the word is. It's more, I think it's better for me to actually explore the word and create the word in different ways to leave. I mean, I suppose it's realising something within that, but not having a conclusion within that. It's just a new...
Well, you're literally bringing it to life, the word. Like literally, it's becoming alive and living in the space, and it's in motion, so it's kind of... I think that's sort of really what's really interesting about... the more I learn about contemporary Aboriginal culture and understanding, it's still alive. Like, it's not just this thing that's done and dusted. It's absolutely still in motion, and it still has so many variants and diversions around what contemporary Aboriginal culture is. Like, and I think that's, this is it living.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, when I went through my schooling, it was the idea of Aboriginal people, it was a static. static history.
past
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
from a
yeah,
long time
yeah.
ago.
That culture had stopped, and that's where they had stopped. And it's not. It's a vibrant culture that keeps going, even with the history that's the histories that are keep being revealed. It's still going, and it's still sort of creating wonderful spaces for itself. And this is sort of, I suppose, my celebration partly in that is within these works is that celebration of that momentum and that sort of vibrancy that continues. So,
And
yeah.
for me, can we pop into this room? Your work feels to me like you're deciphering understandings and learnings for potentially us to get a insight into what you've learnt yourself in your own uncovering. It's almost like it's almost like being an archaeologist. In a way, it feels archaeological sometimes, but then in this incredible dynamic, kinetic form. So can you talk about what this work is? Because when I look at it, I'm thinking a bicycle, I'm thinking spirograph, but what's actually happening here is quite incredibly profound in so many other ways.
Yeah, well, the mechanism itself and is sort of comes from printing and printer technology. So the mechanism is programmed to trace around words. So you won't see that in there, but it traces around each word from one of the words, baru, which is a very strong word, which is soil, ground, country, time and space. And so you won't see that unless you sit here for a long time and work out where it's going. You won't see that translated here or sort of traced out here. But each side has 25 strings, and each of these elements, each string goes to a different element that's in another room that we'll probably get to see soon. So it's that creating, and it's not, I don't want to, and the same as the other word, I don't want to translate that word again, but I want to give it new space. And it's for me, it's part of it. I'm learning, I suppose, with the viewer, because when I create these works, I haven't created them before. So what comes of this is new to me as well. So it's yeah.
I remember I was at a talk you did when you did talk about the word baru and how you still hadn't grasped what it really meant, because it was sort of like the earth and the landscape and soil and a few other things that you mentioned before.
Time and space, yeah.
Yeah, time and space. Like it is. Woo! I love it. And it made me think about that. I kept thinking about it, trying to understand it myself. But even just by you saying that if you have to sit and watch it for a long time to even begin to see the word baru, again, as the viewer, you're experiencing the concept of baru.
Yeah. It's, I mean, the word itself, I mean, is learnt around the Broome area. And it's about being there. It's about being on that country, and it's about that time. It's not something that's you can read and it's cerebral and sits in your mind and you understand it. It's something you need to experience within the place where the word comes from, because it's unique to that area. So it's, for me, I don't think I'll ever know the word, but I'll keep exploring that space that could exist for the word.
It's extraordinary. That word just blows my mind. Now, let's just quickly take the viewers on the journey. So we're now following this piece. It is making sounds as well, which is sort of like an electronic buzz. And then it continues all the way up into the far room.
Yeah, this is a new iteration, and I think it's been a wonderful opportunity to explore this space, because all the works, I mean, every exhibition for everyone it responds to the space, it's curated to the space, but given the opportunity for the wall height here and bringing, disconnecting, and there's an intentional disconnect between that work and the other work, and it's almost giving that moment to I don't know, it's hear the difference as you move from one space to another and see that it's sort of, in a way, there's a movement. Well, you can see it in here. There's a movement that happens within the tension of the strings, and they keep moving all the way. They're not just a static thing. So there's this sort of leads you to that space where it becomes completely different. There's no way to interpret what's happening there in that space and what's happening here. But there is, for me, even there's a walking backwards and forwards between the two to try to understand the process in the way. Even for me, it was hard enough to install it because
Yeah, well, it's like you're sort of comparing, like, so if that means that over there, but then it's shifting here to be transmuted over there. It's like physics, time and space.
Yeah. There's those elements in there. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's sort of it wasn't intentional to have that initially, but it was playing within the space and understanding that little space there. And there's, although my understanding of physics is very low, there was a lot to balance out with this work, and the weights on the end, each thing had to balance, so they worked with the machine. So there's this sort of concept of being able to, with the technology, it's sort of binary, it's hard-coded, but there's still that balancing, that human balancing that needs to happen to make the interactions between that section and the other section.
I have to see what's hiding. Where's it? I haven't seen where this goes yet, and what the end result is. Or is it a result? Am I using the right word? Because it's constantly changing with you. You say one thing, but then it becomes another. Right. So this is it. Wow, it is having a massive impact in such a profound way.
Yeah, it's marking the walls, and that's I think part of it for me is sort of marking these walls, these walls that have colonised, in a sense, these buildings that have colonised. So this will constantly just go over the same, or it's actually with 100 strings, it's doing something a little bit different every time with every word. But it'll build up and it sort of gets these wonderful, subtle textures within the mark making on there, which is, I don't know how this one will evolve. Yeah. And coming into the space, I knew roughly what I was going to do, but it was the day where we were hanging, or a couple of days we were hanging and working out the balancing, that it actually appeared. So there's, even within that, there's because of the movement, some of these will scrape against each other and hang on each other and catch each other up and then do something different. So
it's all chaos, Robert.
yeah,
It's a chaotic world. We can't control everything.
I'm sure someone could sort of understand this mathematically, but my head's not that good to be able to understand. So I like that because it's a reveal for me as well as everyone else.
You must love it at the end when you've just sort of built this amazing mechanism that's then finally you get to see what it has to tell you. Like, it's actually revealing itself to you. It must be quite a profound moment for yourself as the artist to see what your art has to almost like report back to you.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of chance that happens within all the works, and I don't know whether that's me not being a confident artist by letting the machine do the thing, or
Come on, no, you're a genius, don't you know?
but I like that, and the outcomes I couldn't create myself. If I tried to create them, they would appear too contrived, I think. And it's letting that control, the machine have that control to mark those walls in the way it does, is, I think that's where I find I get excited about that, because that sort of reveals new things to me that I can sort of carry forward into something else. And sometimes things work really well, and some things are interesting. Yeah.
But that was meant to happen, just like that. Now, finally, this work and your work is highly personal, but it also speaks to a larger critical conversation around the erasure of Indigenous Aboriginal culture and history. What is the tension between the personal for you and the greater conversation?
Yeah, I think the personal is deeply embedded in my work, and I think it will always be that way. And I think it's for me, it's exploring hidden histories, and these are universal hidden histories within Australia, Indigenous history that isn't well known or hasn't been told at all, or even we're talking about sort of from things like sort of taking children away from their parents, as like what happened to my grandmother, was moved into a convent at an early age, and part of that is within the conversation is within these works, which erase words that from the Chief Protector A.O. Neville, who was the Chief Protector of Aborigines in WA. So these are letters that were sent to my grandmother and great-grandmother. So I'm using the words from them and erasing them off these boards. And in a sense revealing them but erasing them, and there's 3 conversations here going on, and that one deals with the denial of citizenship for my grandmother or great-grandmother, because she was still associating herself with other Aboriginal people, and so it was that idea that lose your culture, lose your people, or you won't be a citizen. And so it was, it was sort of that.
Horrendous.
But it's also the language, because it's a new language that was used to control them and overlay on their language. So part of this is sort of that understanding that
it's a letter. So it has this sort of very patriarchal, control factor, systematic. This is a letter from me. I'm what was he called? The Chief Protector. Yeah. I mean, did he make that name up?
I wonder,
Outrageous.
It's a sort of title that, you'd have to give yourself. But he had, his values were very skewed, and I think that a lot of the values at that time were very skewed towards First Nations Aboriginal people. And these letters, going through all these letters, there's a lot in them that just indicates across the board it wasn't just this isolated case. This was happening systemically throughout Australia, and I think it's telling these little stories, and for me it's the understanding of what happened, because I didn't know about this for a long time within my life, I suppose, and there's core things that I've had to disrupt, foundational things that I've had to disrupt of my own beliefs to really understand some of these things. There's a lot that I don't understand still, but it's bringing these things forward for myself, but also adding, I think, to another little image to that bigger picture of Australian Indigenous history. So it's sort of, it's an ongoing pursuit within my practice.
Well, it'll be your whole life.
It is. I think it is. I think this is...
And generations to come. There's so much to be understood and reclaimed and recalibrated and restored, and some things are lost forever, and that's the great grief, isn't it? And I guess, works like this allow people to come and actually immerse themselves in that sort of systematic erasure in a way, but at the same time celebrate the incredible culture that we should be, all of us collectively being, celebrating.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there's a great place for celebration within that culture, and I don't know. Within my work, I think I show some of the past, some of the history, the unpleasant histories within Australia. But I also I hope that what's happened here becomes something that is I don't know. It's not giving hope, but it's painting a very positive image of what's coming out of all this, because it is a very positive thing that's coming out of it, and revealing the beauty within it, as opposed to just bringing forward, I suppose, the horrors. It's sort of coming out of that. There's a lot of wonderful things within a lot of all of Australian Indigenous culture, but some of it sits on some very uncomfortable histories, or a lot of it sits on a lot of
lots of it. But I mean, you can't. I understand what you're saying, and you can't absolutely. The more we acknowledge what has happened in those histories, the better we all are for it. But particularly First Nations people, because God, it's such a hard task to sometimes understand, I guess, when you're faced with such horror.
Yeah, indeed, and I still. I don't think there's ever a point where I'm going to go, hey, I'm done here now with the idea of what has happened, and I think the more people talk about these, there's more that comes out, and I don't know. I'm very positive and I try to remain positive. So there's subtleties within my work that shows I suppose the darker histories, but hopefully it's a work that has that positive future projection within it. That's being driven by some of the unpleasant things. And
Well, I think if you're still on for another week, so definitely make time, spend a long time in here, because it just keeps revealing itself for what this incredible work is. And congratulations, it's been a really great, mind-blowing experience.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, thanks for the chat. I mean, it's been wonderful to talk about, because I think every time I talk about the work and chat to you, and the chat we had before, I think there was a lot that came out of that chat for me that revealed what I was thinking about and doing. So, thank you for that. And come along and have a wander in the space and listen to the sounds and
immerse.
Indeed, yeah.
Thank you.